Ish. All right. So yesterday we got started on chapter 5 and we were classifying angles and unknown angle measures. So I believe we got through the first set of vocabulary and the second set of vocabulary. And now we're on to the third and final set of vocabulary. So there is a lot of vocab. This word right here is adjacent. So I want you to go ahead and decode that. Adjacent, yep. We are going to practice saying these words because if you can say them, it helps you to remember them a lot better. So this word is adjacent. So you don't really say the D. Some people say adjacent. You really just say adjacent. Don't worry about it. Yep. So when I decode it, I'm actually going to get rid of the D because when you say it, you don't say adjacent. You just say adjacent. Adjacent angle. So I'm just going to do adjacent and then angles. Adjacent angles. And we're going to practice saying that together. So our first word today is adjacent angles. What's the word? Adjacent angles. All right. So adjacent angles are angles right next to each other. Angles right next to each other. And I'm going to put a bullet point there. And we're going to end up with 2 bullet points. So adjacent angles are angles that are right next to each other. And since adjacent angles are right next to each other, they share a common side. So I'm going to put share a side. Adjacent angles are right next to each other and they share a side. Have you guys ever heard the word adjacent before? Adjacent means next to. So the best example I've come up with to help you guys remember adjacent angles is that my classroom is adjacent to Miss Bowerman's classroom. So Miss Bowerman's room is over there. It's next to it. Good. So adjacent means next to. So my classroom is next to or is adjacent to Miss Bowerman's room. And then adjacent angles have to share a common side. Miss Bowerman and I share a wall. So this wall behind me right here, I share that wall with Miss Bowerman's room. So adjacent angles are right next to each other. They share a side. Just like my room is right next to Miss Bowerman's room and we share a common wall. You're very, very good. My room is also adjacent to Mrs. Anderson's room. Yep. So when we go to draw adjacent angles, I want you to go ahead and just draw an angle that looks like this. Now currently that's just one angle. If I want to make adjacent angles, I need 2 angles right next to each other that share a common side. So if I draw a line halfway through this, what I just did was I created 2 separate angles that are right next to each other. They are adjacent to each other. And they also share a common side. So I could highlight this side right here. And those 2 adjacent angles share that side. Any question on adjacent angles? No, they don't have to be the same size. Good question. Don't have to be the same size. All right, this next word is congruent. So go ahead and decode congruent angles for me. I'd probably do congruent angles. Congruent angles. And we're going to say that word together too. Our second word for today is congruent angles. What's the word, class? All right, I want to hear everybody. Congruent angles? Congruent angles. Very good. Does anybody remember what the word congruent means? Same. Very good. The word congruent means the same or equal to. And we also use this symbol right here to label congruent. So I want you to go ahead and write that symbol. It's an equal sign with that squiggly line above it. That is how we write out the word congruent in shorthand. It's basically just a shorter way of writing the word congruent. So congruent angles are angles that are the same size. Very good. That are the same size. And they have to be the exact same size. All right. So, yeah, if we wanted to draw two congruent angles, I'm going to do my absolute best to draw two angles that look like they're about the same size. So those two angles look about the same. And then another way that we can label two angles as congruent is by putting this congruency mark right in the corner there. And if I only draw one line in my congruent angle, I also only want to draw one line. So if you see one line in this angle and one line in this angle, you can assume that those are the same. But let's say that I were to draw a different size angle. So that angle looks a little bigger, right? And then if I were to draw another one, this time, if I wanted to show that these two were congruent, I would do two congruency marks on both of them. And those two congruency marks say that these two are congruent. And the one congruency mark say that these two are congruent right here. But then since this has one and this has two, we know that these are not congruent to each other. Any questions on that? Go ahead. It's vertical angles. So go ahead and decode vertical angles. I would probably do vertical. You're on the right track. So vertical, if you think about like vertical means to go up and down. Vertical angles is our word. And we're actually going to write our example before we do the definition. I want you to go ahead and draw this line like that. And then draw another line that's crisscrossing. Intersecting, good. I like the vocab. Intersecting, good. Vertical angles share a vertex. So this is the middle. Very good. The vertex is the middle. So vertical angles, they have to share a vertex. So I'm going to go ahead. My first bullet point is going to be share a vertex because they've got to share that point right there, that vertex. In this diagram, there are actually two different sets of vertical angles. I'm going to go ahead and label the first set. This angle right here is a vertical angle with this angle right here. You see how they're stacked on top of each other? And the other thing that I like to remember for vertical angles is if I just look at this piece right here, that's a V, right? And then if I just look at this, it's another V. So it's just two V's that are stacked on top of each other, that like reflect on top of each other and they share a vertex. So these are vertical angles and these are vertical angles. So in the second set of vertical angles, I'm going to do two congruency marks to show that this angle is a vertical angle for this one. So these two are vertical angles and these two are vertical angles. This is geometry, man. This is geometry. You're going to take a whole class in high school that's about geometry. And this that we're going over right now is going to help you tremendously. In fact, Mr. Twilliger at our PLC the other day complimented me because he said that his 9th graders this year that are in geometry, when he went to go over angles, this is only the second year that I've taught this unit. And he said that when he went over it, he was amazed. The kids are like, oh, yeah, Mrs. White said those are vertical angles because of this. And, oh, during winter time, Mrs. White had us do an activity where we had angles on the floor, and we had to, with a partner, jump back and forth. And Mr. Twilliger was like, Mrs. White, nice shot. So this is going to help you tremendously when you take his class. So vertical angles have to share a vertex. And then I like to remember that they reflect onto one another, which means you could take this side and flip it over onto this side. So we could put for our second bullet point, reflect on top of each other. Can reflect on top of each other. They're stacked on top of one another. Oh, you could have, there is no limit. There could be 3 different congruency marks. 4 different ones. It just kind of depends. All right, now let's flip to this next page. Oh, I'm sorry. And on this next page, I'm actually going to start a different video.